Now for a little story. Once upon a time there was this prince. He was a kind and wholesome prince with wonderfully kind and wholesome parents, a king and queen who were loved by everyone. The prince had everything you could ever dream of. Wonderful food from all over the world, exotic spices to flavor and tantalize his taste buds. The best clothing you'd ever seen, sewn by seamstresses from around the world. If you wanted an exotic animal, he'd have it. If you wanted wonderful decor, he had it. If you wanted a wonderful lady, he'd have it. If you wanted wonderful intoxicants, he had it. Gold, jewels, nothing was unavailable to this prince, apart from freedom. You see, the king and queen had him in a compound. Oh, it was huge. It was acres and acres in size, but it still had a wall around the outside. They were protecting him from the outside world, is their excuse. One day his friends visited, and they were chatting, and his friend noticed that the prince was a little bit meh, and said to him, "What's going on?" He said, "I'm bored." And his friend was like, "What? You're bored? You've got absolutely everything, and if you don't have what you want, they'll get it for you. What's going on?" "Well, I want to go outside." And his friend said, "You can't go outside. You're a prince. You're becoming the next king. This is all part of the process." He says, "Yeah, but I feel like I'm missing something." So his friend said, "All right, just this once, I'll take you outside. I know a way how to sneak out the compound." He said, "Okay," so they snuck out. The prince's mind was blown at the world. All these different odors and noises and experiences. He was taken to the coast. He could dip his foot into the sea. He could see forests he'd never seen before. This was amazing. And then once he saw this person, and they were coughing and spluttering, and he said to his friend, "What's wrong with that person then?" And his friend laughed. He said, "He's just ill, he's just ill, that's all." He said, "Well, sometimes what happens, you're not 100%, and you end up getting a bit ill, getting a bit ill." The prince said, "What, does that happen to you?" He says, "It happens to you." He says, "Yeah, quite often." He says, "Well, it should do." He says, "Well, happens to everyone. Happens to everyone." And the prince was like, "I've got to go back home. I've got to go back home." So the prince went back home. He'd never experienced anything like this before. And so he had to do a lot of thinking about this. It's like, ill, that looks to you. A while later, he'd recovered from this, and he said to his friend, "Come on, let's go out again." His friend said, "Are you sure?" He says, "Yeah, I'm over the ill thing. Don't worry about it." He says, so they went out. They had a wonderful time, they met wonderful people, and then he saw somebody. He said to his friend, "That person, they've got an illness, so what kind of illness is it?" And his friend laughed and said, "No, that's not ill, that's old." And the prince was puzzled. He said, "Old, what's that mean?" And his friend said, "Well, it happens to everyone. It's basically what happens is, like when you reach puberty and your body changes and stuff." And the prince said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, that isn't where it stops. Your body changes throughout your entire life until you get old and frail, just like that man there." And his prince was shocked and said, "Will this happen to you?" He says, "Yeah, it happens to everyone." "So it's going to happen to me?" He says, "Yeah, it's going to happen to you." The prince said, "I've got to go back home." So now the prince had two things to worry about, getting ill and getting old. This was terrible. He never in his life thought anything like this would happen. But a while later he got over it, and then he said to his friend, "I want to go out again." And his friend said, "Are you sure about that? We've been out twice already, and both times you've been shocked." And he said to his friend, Nah, I'm good, I'm over that." So they went out, and they met wonderful people, and they had a wonderful time. And then they turned a corner, and they saw the street. There was this procession going past. And he turned to his friend, "So what's going on here then? This is what they're enjoying something? They're celebrating something? I didn't realize this was a public holiday." And his friend laughed and said, No, that's a funeral procession." And the prince was puzzled, said, "A funeral procession? What's that then?" He says, "Well, it means that someone has died." And the prince said, "Died? What's that mean?" He says, "Oh, well, it happens to everyone. Like when you get like a toy, when it breaks and you can't repair it." He says, "Yeah." He says, "That basically happens to people." He says, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, life is just like a one-way trip. You're born, you live, you get ill, you get old, and then you die. And that's it, you're done." And he said, "This is going to happen to you." He says, "It happens to everyone. It happened to me. It's going to happen to me. Yes, it's going to happen to you." "Oh, God, I've really got to go home now." So they took him home. The prince's mind was blown. And his parents noticed that he wasn't his happy, cheerful self as usual, and said to him, "Hey, Prince, we need to have a chat." He says, "Yeah." He says, "We're worried. What can we get for you?" And the prince said, "I need my freedom." He says, what do you mean? He says, well, I'm stuck in this compound. I need to go out. I need to do a heck of a lot of thinking by myself. King said, well, we can't do that. He said, you've got to be the next king. This is part of being a new king. This is part of your education. It's okay. I will stay here for the rest of my life and do everything you're saying if you can stop me from getting ill, getting old, and stop me from dying. The king said, I can't do that. He said, well, you can't keep me here. And so the king and the queen were sad and crying. Prince said, once I found out what's going on, I'm going to come back. I said, don't worry, I'm not gone forever. It's just I need to go for this time. And the king and queen understood, and they opened the gates of the compound and let him go out. Now remember, this was a prince, and he was dressed up in the finest of clothing you could ever see. And so suddenly he was like a movie star. All these people coming up to him and saying, oh, hey, Prince, how's it going? Oh, you're wonderful, actually fantastic, wonderful, marvelous. And the prince was like, no, I don't want this. I want to be anonymous. So he saw a beggar, and he goes up to the beggar and says, hey, beggar, how are you doing? He said, well, I'm doing fine, yourself. He says, do you want to trade? And the beggar was confused and said, what do you mean? I want your clothing and your little beggy bowl and all the stuff that you've got, but I will give you what I'm wearing. I've got the finest clothes in the entire world, and in my pocket I've got gold and jewels as well, so I'll give you all that in exchange for what you have. And the beggar was like, what's a con? He said, no, this isn't a con. I want to be anonymous right now. You see all these people following me? I don't want that right now. So the beggar said, okay. So they traded clothes and possessions, and the prince was now dressed up beggar's clothing, and he had his little beggar bowl. And then he sat and he did a lot of thinking. For the first time in his life, everyone ignored him. And at first he was a bit shocked with this, but then he found it really nice. He was anonymous, he was contemplative. So he watched the world go by, and he was thinking about it, getting ill, getting old and dying. He came across groups, like there was one group who reckoned that everything was an illusion, including food. And so what they did is they ate just enough to keep the body from falling apart, but anything else, they said, was some kind of illusion. It was an addiction, and they had to kick it to be able to get to the next level of evolved entities. So he did that for a while, and after a while he said, no, I understand what you're doing, and I understand you're trying to get to some kind of purity, but I don't think this is the way to do it. I mean, he saw these other people who realized that the mind, the body, and the soul are all intertwined. So if the body's broken, it's going to affect both the mind and the soul. So they exercised. They stretched the body in weird ways, and it was called yoga. And so he tried that for a while, and he said, yeah, this is okay, but there's something missing, because this is going to make me healthy and strong, but it's not going to stop me from getting ill, getting old and dying. I've got to do something else. So years passed, and beggar-dressed prince traversed as far as he could, experienced all these different philosophies, and couldn't find the solution. And then one day, he was sat in a forest. He was sat against this huge tree, sat back with his eyes closed, taking in the chirping of the birds, the whoosh of the wind through the leaves and the trees above him, enjoying the cool, fresh air, thinking, what could it be? And then all of a sudden, everything clicked, and he realized that everything is everything, and everything is intertwined. Everything exists with everything else. For instance, an animal dies. Other animals come and dine on that animal's flesh. When they've finished, smaller insects come in and finish what's left. When that's finished, mushrooms come in, start breaking down the bone and stuff. Once that's broken down, it goes into the soil, which feeds the plants. The plants grow fruit. The fruit get eaten by the animals. The animals defecate the seeds. The seeds grow into more plants. The animal dies. The whole cycle begins again, and everything is intertwined with each other. And then you realized, yes, life is an illusion. But the illusion is humanity. Somewhere along the line, they've tried to remove themselves from this unity, from this cycle, and become their own entities. They've been like the spoiled child that think they're better than everyone else, so they don't need to bring the bat and ball to the game anymore. But you realize it was the illusion was they were trying to create happiness by having more luxurious things, by controlling other people, by treating other animals as inferiors, by trying to mold nature into things that they wanted as opposed to what nature wanted. And every time they tried something, they aspired to something, they achieved that aspiration, then they suddenly realized that that didn't work, and they try something else, and that didn't work, and they keep aspiring, achieving, and then getting disappointed. They got more stuff until the stuff started owning them. They acquired more employees for the business until suddenly their mind was full of like, how do I take care of all these employees? So they hire a manager. Then the manager takes care of these people. And then the owner's like, is this manager doing the job? So they couldn't think straight. They couldn't relax. And this was the illusion. So what was needed, in the prince's opinion, is you have to step back. You have to give away all of these worldly possessions. Get yourself your own version of beggar clothing and beggar bowl and just live life and understand we're all part of this universe. And he thought, not make yourself homeless and poor. No, that's not what he meant. He meant have the comfortable house, have the running water and the heat, have the bit of entertainment going on, but treat that as that instead of treating it as I've got a bigger house than my next door neighbor. Instead of thinking I need to get the biggest, fastest car, think I need something to get me from A to B. The prince was at peace. He realized illness, old age or death, it was just stages in life. And he realized that time wasn't a straight line. It was amorphic. He realized that we're all one and the spirit lives. That every animal, every plant, every fish, every bird, everything has the same soul. They have the same instincts. How, like the old adage, if you prick me, do I not bleed? If you hit me, do I not scream? If you love me, do I not love you back? All of these things, every single thing that is alive experiences, but they just do it in a different way because they're in a different form. And the prince realized that every living thing has the same right to exist because every living thing is on the same journey, a plane of being born, learning how to exist in the form they're in, learning how to survive in their environment, learning how to grow into adulthood, learning how to making babies, learning how to adapt to aging and getting old, learning how to know eventually you're going to die, learning how to die. But the spirit will continue on because as the old philosopher said, energy cannot be destroyed, it can only be changed. So there we go. There's a little story for you. I hope you enjoyed it. Oh, by the way, the name of the prince? His name was Buddha.